Helldivers 2 is on the brink of change. This is something that I think anybody could foresee at pretty much any given point because this game has stayed pretty damn popular for pretty damn long, and, well, that's just not normal. We've talked about it in videos in the past. However, this is one of the first live service games since, I believe, Valorant that has stayed, well, popular. Most live service games come out and fall flat on their face, and that's for a multitude of reasons, but this game is unique. It's doing something special. It's pumping out a ton of content, and as such, players keep playing the game. However, that does come with its own special set of challenges, especially given the size of the studio of Arrowhead Studios. So today what I want to do is I want to talk about how Arrowhead Studios is giving players control over the future of the game, and even more so, some of the warnings that the developers had for players going on into the future. We have a lot to discuss today. So lock and load. Let's dive in. If you watched any of my prior videos, then you know one of the things that I love talking about is all the new content that Arrowhead Studios introduces into Helldivers 2, and they've been doing it at a crazy rate. And this week is no different than any other, as we're already starting to see images of the Illuminate start to surface. Paul Tozzi over at Forbes writes, first images of Helldivers 2's Illuminate alien enemies emerge. First it was some tech, now it's some actual images of Helldivers 2's Illuminate enemies that are leaking, implying a different sort of invasion may be nigh. From user Ironsights over on Reddit, we have our first images of the Illuminate themselves, which I would describe as a combination of the Protoss from StarCraft and the Fallen from Destiny 2. Here's a picture of an Adept Mage with different sorts of textures applied. The Illuminate were said to be extinct after the first Helldivers game, though, as ever, it's a bit hard to trust what Super Earth leadership says at any given time. But with their return, their design and tech seems evolved, and I'm curious what the story explanation for their return will be. If there is one, given that almost all the information of the game comes from the Ministry of Truth, which tends to be rather tight-lipped about things like that, or they'll say, as we absolutely expected, the Illuminate have returned. While their arrival does seem nigh, it may still be a bit of a wait. These are only a few files after all, and the game is currently in the midst of a campaign that has enemy forces surging and many defenses being mounted. Though I suppose with the pressure on Helldiver forces from multiple fronts, that would sort of be the perfect time for the Illuminate to launch their own attack. In-game hints about the Illuminate have been limited, blue beams from the sky and cloaked ships lurking around, and a message you can occasionally hear about the extinction being a lie. Now, us Helldivers aren't any strangers to leaks. We've seen weapon and armor profiles, hints of the Shriekers, and more. Since the launch of Helldivers 2, it's basically been a leak factory, with many of the things that have been data mined finding their way into the game shortly thereafter. With that said, I think it should be mentioned that even though the Illuminate will undoubtedly make it into the game at some point, the developers have started to warn players against putting too much stock into the leaks that they find. Morgan Park with PC Gamer writes, Helldivers 2 dev warns players not to fall in love with data-mined content that might never come out. Some are ancient leftovers, some are things that will pop up in the game. Morgan writes, the Helldivers 2 community has demonstrated a ravenous appetite for new stuff. Guns, stratagems, suits, helmets, boosters. Arrowhead has kept the update hose spraying these last 2 months, but it hasn't stopped players from looking deep into the code to find stuff yet to come. Through data mining, players have discovered unreleased vehicles, guns, and armor pieces that are likely destined for a future Warbond or galactic event. But not all of them. One Arrowhead dev would like to remind players that just because data mined content is there doesn't mean it'll ever see the light of day. I don't look at data mined stuff, and I would avoid falling in love with it, replied Arrowhead dev Evil Boss to a fan on the Helldivers 2 Discord server. Some are old leftovers, some are ancient leftovers, some are things that will pop up in the game. Morgan continues with, that fan was referring to data-mined armor sets, including some recolors of basic Helldiver armor that looked pretty slick. It's a good idea not to put too much stock into leaks, no matter how much I'd love a yellow or olive green makeover for my favorite armor. But much of what's been gleaned from Helldivers 2's code so far has turned up in the game. The guns that would eventually come with the Democratic Detonation Warbond, like the Agitator Marksman Rifle, have been kicking around on Reddit leak threads for over a month. The same goes for the mechs before they eventually showed up in the game, and we're still waiting on those wheeled vehicles that cheaters have been playing with for over a month. Vehicles seem far along enough in development that they're sure to come out at some point, but other leaked stratagems floating around are so unfinished that it's entirely possible that they're scrapped ideas still lingering in the code. What I learned from years of covering leaks in shooters is that sometimes these new discoveries are just around the corner, other times they're years away, and often there's something that the studio prototyped but abandoned. For that reason, I tend not to see leaks as promises of what's to come, but a preview of what might happen. Let's face it, Arrowhead Studios has been on an absolute blitz. They've been releasing content into the game to the likes that we haven't seen any other live service game do prior, and it's hard to keep up with. There's something new that's happening almost every single week, and that's going to take a toll on that studio. And it's got me asking now whether or not they need to keep continuing at the pace that they're going, if they even can to begin with, and even more so looking at things like the Illuminate. Is this even the best time, in the near future for them to introduce another faction into the game? When is that right time exactly? And while some players are going to look at player counts and say, oh, well, it's starting to taper off, it's a natural decay that most games normally have, and that an injection of new content like that would reinvigorate the game, well, you don't really want to pull out the stops immediately all at the beginning and then not have anything to feed the players later down the road. And even more so, we have to keep in mind the size of Arrowhead Studios. It really hasn't changed all that much since they released Helldivers 2. And we've talked about it on multiple occasions about how, the studio is so small in comparison to the amount of success that they've gotten. And I think that there's a lot of people that believe that because they get that much success, they can just immediately hire on a lot of people. But one thing that many of the smartest CEOs in the video game industry want to try to avoid is hiring on too many people just to lay them off later on. And that's exactly what happened. If Arrowhead Studios just immediately doubled their size, well, chances are they wouldn't be able to hold on to those people 6 months to a year from now when the game eventually, kind of simmers down a little bit. Players start moving around, playing other games. They get bored with one thing, they come back to it later, and that's just how we play games. And expecting these companies to just pop up overnight and turn into massive powerhouses like Activision or something like that just isn't realistic, and they don't really have the resources to be able to do things like that. And to be honest with you, I don't think the players want that either. Now, I want to take some time to talk about some of the community posts and the developer responses on both Discord and Reddit, where Arrowhead Studios has been coming out, kind of explaining the difficulties that they're facing between adding new content and fixing existing issues within the game. Harvey writes, Helldivers 2 is one of the most impressive multiplayer games in recent memory, enjoying such a runaway success that you could barely play it for the first handful of weeks due to chronically overloaded servers. It's also, unfortunately, a little buggy right now, and I'm not talking Terminids. As highlighted by recent patch notes, damage over time effects aren't applied under certain conditions, and certain scopes, like the anti-material rifle, have been busted for even longer. Sickles can't shoot through foliage, and the spear misses more than I whiff on headshots on automaton hulks. It's a little rough out there. Even before some of these bugs, crashes were about as common as Super Earth flags on any appropriate patriotic suburb. Arrowhead Games has been trying to keep pace, but one gets the feeling that they're losing the war of whack-a-mole right now. In a message on the game's Discord server, community manager Spitz painted a picture of the studio's current problems. Spitz writes, most of the bugs in the known issues list in the patch notes are actively being worked on, but they're either large fixes that require a bit of time or low-priority issues behind other things, and most should be patched in the next major build. It's difficult to maintain our cadence of one warbond per month while also fixing major technical glitches in time for the next patch. Harvey continues with, this goes against conventional gamer non-developer wisdom, one that argues development teams are made out of highly specialized devs working in silos, or in other words, that Helldivers 2's blistering patch cadence isn't taking away time from troubleshooting. While there are a few grains of truth to this, especially with larger teams, it's not at all uncommon for devs to wear multiple hats, as Spitz later explains to a response to a thread on the game's subreddit. Saying, this is patently untrue, Spitz replies to a comment arguing about bug fixes taking priority over everything else. Arrowhead still has a very small team compared to the success of the game, and while we have dedicated QA, the people that are fixing bugs with the weapons and armor, for example, are the same people in charge of making new weapons and armor. It's important to us to maintain the cadence that we promised, one warbond a month, but equally important to everyone to fix the glaring bugs and technical issues. There's just only so much time in one work week. And this is something that's supported by the CEO of Arrowhead Studios, Johan Pielstedt, who responded to a recent post on Reddit titled, "This sub is writing the fine line between constructive input and whiny entitlement," where they criticize other players for begging for a transmog system because they don't agree with Arrowhead's reasoning of why they don't want to have one, and also the rampant posting about how Arrowhead should pause any new content and shore up the game's issues, with the poster arguing that Arrowhead has a contractual responsibility to both Sony and shareholders to deliver on new and monetizable content. Pielstedt responded with, "I appreciate your post and sentiment. Let me add some context. Arrowhead is independently owned by the people working at the studio, and not swayed by shareholders in a traditional sense. Of course, we're in a great partnership with Sony, where we agree to hit on targets, etc., but there isn't a forcing function or requirement per se. We want to deliver the best in the industry, and we are calibrating our efforts of fixing versus new stuff. It's easy to say just fix, don't add, but the reality of the competitiveness in this industry is that we have to do both to stay relevant. We're figuring it out. The demands and expectations on the studio are high, all eyes are on us, and we have a sole purpose: to make the best live service game you've ever played. We just need to find our stride and balance. It's a hot topic at the studio, and I'm sorry for the sloppy mistakes we've made as of recent." I just have to say that as a player, I genuinely appreciate this kind of transparency because it's something that we just don't see anymore. And to be honest with you, they don't have a responsibility to be this transparent with us to begin with. But letting us know, don't worry about any type of shareholders or anything like that. The entire company's self-owned. Basically, the people that are working there are the people that own the studio, which is really good, which means that they have a self-serving prophecy to fill where they want to become wealthy, and the best way for them to find wealth and success is to make sure that their game succeeds. Well, that's great. That's good to know. And it's also good to know that they're not really up against the wall when it comes to their partnership with Sony either. But we also have to keep in mind that there's no such thing as just turning off the switch and not making any more money and just focusing on just trying to fix the game alone, because that's going to take away and push a lot of content down the road much further than I think a lot of people realize. Just because if they took off a week or two or a whole month to work on just fixing the game, that doesn't mean that they're still going to be able to have content ready for the next month. That means that they have to go back to working on that stuff in the next month, which is going to probably push that back a month. And then all of a sudden, everything just falls off the rails and it starts to make more issues than they started with in the first place. And that's something for us to try to take a step back and think about ourselves. We've worked jobs. I've worked jobs where these kind of things happen, where you become understaffed, where things just get really hard and heavy, and you have to do what you can to try to buckle down and take care of as many things as possible. And some things are going to slip through the cracks, and you're going to have to take care of it later. It just is what it is. Some things take priority, other things don't. And people are probably going to disagree with me on this, and to be honest with you, I really don't care. But for the most part, the issues that the game faces, many of the bugs and problems, haven't really stopped me from having a good time playing the game. That doesn't mean that they don't need to be fixed, but that does mean that they are less of a priority than the overall success of the game, and that does come down to the financials and new content. And it's something that's just worth keeping in mind. Game dev isn't a one-size-all-fits position. Studios have managers, artists, audio designers, level designers, weapon designers, QA testers, server engineers, and more. Just because the studio houses 100 employees doesn't mean all of them are qualified to do every job. Many of them will specialize in a few roles, and as such, they have to bounce back and forth. From a managerial perspective, having the people that are designing new weapons and armor also being the people that are fixing new weapons and armor is a great choice. They already know how that stuff is supposed to work and how it's supposed to impact the game. However, keep in mind, every minute they are doing one job, it's taking a minute away from them doing the other job. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing some of the issues in Helldivers 2, especially when they start introducing new content. And in an unprecedented fashion, Arrowhead Studios, in an act of pure transparency, just polled the players on what they're most interested in and what they would like to see the developers work on first. They're just trying to get a feel for how players are, feeling about the game. The first poll asked players how they feel about the current state of the game, with 55%, over 62,000 players, saying, "Great, I'm still having tons of fun," and with 48K players at 42% saying, "Good, I still play often, but enjoying it less than before." And the second poll is the most interesting one. It's titled, "If you had to pick one, which would you see more moving forward? With 36% of players voting different objectives, modifiers, biomes, and planets, and 28% of players saying no new content, fix the technical issues and bugs. Now, a wise man once said, players are the best at pointing out issues that a game has, but we're not the best at fixing them. And Arrowhead Studios going out and polling their audience and seeing exactly where the temperature is the best thing that they could possibly do, because they're getting the feedback, understanding exactly where the priorities of players lie, and they're also giving themselves an idea of how they want to try to lay out a roadmap for future content. What are the things that players need the most to be able to keep playing the game? Oh, okay, well, we're seeing that, at least on the side of content, they just want new things to do, but also a vast majority of players also do want to see many of the bugs and issues and things like that fixed as well, which tells them that maybe they can try to strike a balance where it's a little bit less new content and a little bit more bug fixes until they can finally catch up on one and then push further on into the other one. Being able to just flip the switch and just turn it all off and say no new content and just do this for a while, while it makes sense in the mind, it doesn't actually work in real life, and that's something that they've tried to illustrate with their talks, and also it's just something that we can see just doesn't really work in the real world either. Now, personally, I'm torn in between. I want to see new content, especially when it comes to like new mission types. I loved the tower defense mission that we had with the automatons. I really enjoyed the TCS towers and stuff like that. I want to see more of that kind of stuff in the future because that's what really diversifies the gameplay. I love new content. I love new weapons and stratagems and things like that. But to be honest with you, I just want more diversity in the things that we can do while we're playing the game, especially when it comes to zones. I've already seen a lot of people talking about urban warfare and stuff like that, fighting on Cyberstan and things like that. I want that. I definitely want that more than anything, but I also realize that's going to come with some pretty severe technical issues aside with that, so I'm wondering if they would actually even be able to implement something like that. Even more so, at the exact same time, even though I want all that same content, I would also like to use a flamethrower when I'm not hosting. So they have things that they have to work on, but they still have to deliver us some content. It's their job to find a solid balance between them, and to be honest with you, with the level of success that the game has seen so far, I have no doubt that's exactly what they're going to do. Arrowhead Studios was hit with unexpected success, meaning that they have to do what they didn't expect to do, which is feed a hungry crowd that's much larger than they ever expected. Taking a couple of weeks off or a month off just to fix content and fix bug issues would have a massive impact on player interest, and we can't act like it wouldn't. From my perspective, the only thing that Arrowhead can do is continue to do what they've been doing and make smart hires to fill out the positions that they need. I think that many people lack the perspective on what it takes to make a studio like Arrowhead Studios. They say hire more people, but forget that many of the people that are working on Helldivers 2 needed to have military experience or firearm experience, which limits your prospect pool pretty significantly. Not to mention, we have no idea how many developers live near them or what positions that they're looking to fill. Live service games, hell, just games in general, are incredibly competitive. The industry is so competitive. Games are so quickly consumed nowadays and tossed to the side for the next big thing. Developers have to do whatever they can within their means to be able to maintain relevancy and excite players. And for some games, that's easier said than done. And it's a sentiment that was shared by the CEO of Arrowhead Studios when he was responding to that post over on Reddit, telling players of their limitations and what they're facing, how competitive the industry is, and how they just want to make the best live service game ever made. Again, Arrowhead Studios and their CEO are proving to be a Chad of the industry by just being transparent with their audience. While they aren't swayed by shareholders, they still have a responsibility to make the game financially successful and continue to milk the success of the game in what I consider is still the peak of its popularity. A PvE horde shooter still hitting 200k concurrent players on Steam is wild, and it's likely not over, as we're seeing a lot of other content is planned and well on the way, and I wouldn't be surprised that the minute another faction enters the scene, like the Illuminate or faction bosses are released into the game, you're going to see those player counts skyrocket yet again. The only immediate thing that Arrowhead Studios needs to do to keep players happy and keep them interested in the game is just keep working on the Galactic War. Make more crazy things continue to happen. We have to have more toys to play with and more enemies for us to fight. And if they do those things, then we're going to keep playing the game. Now, I'm sure that there are going to be people that are going to disagree with me on this, but from my perspective, in my honest opinion, The one thing, no, there's three things that players actually care about. Does it feel good? Is it fun to play? And is there stuff to do? We really only care about content. We care about how the game is. And that feel part does go towards the bugs, but that pales in comparison to making sure that we have a lot of different things to experience when we're actually in that game and we're playing it. It pales in comparison to the continued success of the game, the breadth of content that the game has, and, well, the level of success that hopefully the game can still achieve. The game is still wildly popular, more popular than I think anybody probably would imagine it would still be at this point. I didn't. I would imagine that after a couple of months, people would have moved on to something else, but everybody loves it. They love the story. They love the galactic war. They love the community. They love the content. They love everything about the game. And while, yeah, the game does have a handful of issues, and some of them are a pretty big headache, for the most part, a lot of that stuff is relatively superficial in the face of everything else that we get to experience playing Helldivers 2, especially with how much money we spent on it. It's a damn good deal. And the one thing that really stuck with me was, when the CEO was talking on Reddit, and he said they just want to worry about trying to make the best live service game ever made. And in my honest opinion, they already have. And I'm hoping that they're just going to continue making it. And that's it. So yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it added some level of perspective to what's been going on with the game. And I'm really looking forward to see what exactly the changes are going to be moving forward. I like that they're listening to the players. I like that they're looking to try to implement that into their roadmap moving forward. We're going to see how exactly that affects the game. But more than anything, I'm just looking forward to seeing what comes next. Anyway, thank you guys for watching the video. If you guys enjoyed this video, think about subscribing to the channel, like the video, drop a comment down below, follow me on Twitch, and I will catch you guys next time. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. Peace.
Family, 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 family.